Good evening. When we were in New York about 10 days ago, we had the urge to come to England, but we had no reservations. We had no plans and no arrangements for halls, for lecture or classwork. And still the urge was to come to England, and so we got busy with cables and telephone calls. And we sent several cables ahead and 2 telephone calls before we could get accommodations for living. And then finally found that we would be able to get back to our flat this week. So that we are here and planning whatever work can be given in accordance with accommodations that we can get. In other words, whatever Mr. Eastman can find in the way of rooms, halls, that is the way we will adjust this work. And so it's going to be very much of a spontaneous work this month, and each of us will just do the best we can to be there when we can and know that we lose nothing when we're not there, and find out what can be given to us during this month and part of next month too. In the back of my mind is this. As some of you know, I spoke to Miss Salt's group on Sunday. And in speaking to you, I know that I'm speaking to students who have been with us now for quite a few years, some of you all the way back the entire 10 years that I've been coming to London with this work. You have already discovered that the infinite way is not an easy way. You've also discovered that learning these principles is not as simple as it seems when you read the writings. In other words, as you read, you gather the idea that here is something beautiful and very simple. And it is only after you get into it that you find that it isn't as beautiful as it seems, and far from simple. Some of the beauty is taken out of it by trying to master it. But at least after these many years, you have glimpsed enough that it has held you, and in most cases it must be doing something for you. And the question now comes, how to bring this message into your consciousness in such a way, in such a degree, that it will really come alive and do all that the message should do. Notice I did not say do for you all that it should do for you, because that would be misleading. You are to receive the least of the fruitage of the message of the infinite way. The reason is this. Up to a certain point in our spiritual development, we are seeking its benefits for ourselves. We're thinking of it in terms of what amount of inner peace it can give us, or health, or safety, or security, harmony, happiness. But once you are touched by the Spirit that entire thought leaves you. And you no longer have concern for yourself, because it quickly dawns in your consciousness, what difference would it make if I had all the health and all the happiness and all the prosperity in the world, and the rest of the world were blown up with a bomb, or went down with epidemics, or wars? What really would it matter to me if I had found God's grace and all the rest of the world was suffering? You can catch a little glimpse of that yourself if you stop to think of even the degree of harmony that you're experiencing in your life, and then think of what's going on in China or India or Africa. It must make you feel, oh, if I could give some of my own peace, my own prosperity, my own health, if I could share some tiny bit of what I have discovered. That must enter your thought as you read the news. And I can tell you that once you are touched by the Spirit, you are no longer interested in your own welfare. You know that by the very fact of the Spirit that you'll be fed and clothed and housed, that you will have a measure of prosperity and inner peace. But this no longer concerns you. What concerns you is, in what way can this serve the world? In what way can it serve my neighbor? In what way can it serve my friend? In what way can it serve my enemy? Because in the end, there is no way to overcome an enemy but by making them a friend. Now, we are at that stage in human history where so easily another civilization could be ruined, just as past civilizations have gone. There have been other civilizations in history, in India, in Rome, in Greece, in Egypt, China. There have been other civilizations, come and gone. It wouldn't take much for this present civilization to be wiped out. In the long run, the forces that are operating behind the scene, I mean the spiritual forces, are bringing about a transition in human consciousness so that we are very soon to enter a golden age on earth. That doesn't mean that those who are on earth now will necessarily participate in it. It could very well easily skip a generation if we're careless with these bombs, if we're careless with these international negotiations. And the only ones who would suffer by it is our present generation and perhaps the next one, because this that is taking place in consciousness is bringing the golden age into visible expression. The only question remains is, can anything prevent a holocaust? Can anything prevent a catastrophe? Can anything prevent the wiping out of this present civilization and enabling us, by evolution, to participate during this generation and the next in this unfoldment that is to come? And the answer is this: it is possible to avert what national leaders are really expecting, disaster. The leaders of the nations everywhere are not too hopeful. We travel all of the countries except South America, all of the continents, and we meet those on many levels of life, and there is more pessimism in high places than you can imagine. And the reason is this: there is no human solution to the problems that are facing the world today. No one has a human solution. There isn't a national leader who has the faintest idea of any solution. They're all trying, they're all giving it their best, just as your Prime Minister, our present President, and I'm sure the President of France, are really dedicating their lives, their minds, their hearts and their souls to this question of peace, yet not one of them has an answer. Not even for the sake of being elected could they promise an answer. And as you have seen lately, even their hopes are not too high. And the reason is, there is at the present moment no human solution. Now, there is a solution, but it's spiritual. There is a solution, just as there is that which can make and remake your individual life, that which can be the resurrection unto you, that which can restore the lost years of the locust, that which can lift you up physically, mentally, morally, financially, from wherever you are unto a higher estate. So there is that which can do it universally. And the only problem is, are there 10 righteous men to save the city? Are there groups here and there of sufficient spiritual dedication to do this work? I must tell you an interesting experience. The Japanese man, member of the Japanese government, who was so deeply touched by the message of the infinite way that it brought forth a changed life in his entire family, who translated the Art of Meditation and was responsible for its publication in Japan, in Japanese. That man has become one of the 9 counselors who govern the Japanese Defense Agency, that is the Army, Navy, and Air Force of Japan. And the Japanese military organization functions under the peace treaty that was signed with the Allies, the Western Allies. And in accord with this treaty, they may not have an Army, Navy, and Air Force of sufficient size to defend themselves from attack. They may only have a sufficient defense force for internal defense, that is, for any difficulty that may take place within the country itself. And so this agency has been concerned with the present conditions in South Asia and the fear that communism will land on Japanese soil. And the question arose, how will Japan defend itself should this go further? And our friend wrote an article for the Defense Magazine of Japan, and this has been adopted, suggesting that the defense of Japan be entrusted to daily meditation. Therefore, the armed forces of Japan are to meet daily for a period of meditation. with no interference as to what their religious teaching is, whether they're Buddhists or Zen Buddhists or whatever else they may be, or Christians. Many of them are Christians today. Regardless of what religion they may profess, that they give a period each day to meditation, and that be the defense. Now, as you know, many of you, at least through the papers, the President of the United States is setting up a Peace Corps, supposedly of 5,000 men and women, who are to go into foreign countries and carry some activity of government or other. But the major feature of this Peace Corps is that they are to receive spiritual indoctrination before they leave the United States for their foreign duties. And 21 of these have been chosen to go to Russia. And the International Committee decided on the thunder of silence for 3 weeks of spiritual indoctrination for these 21 people going to Russia. Now, I bring you these two things to show you that at least on this President's organization and in the Japanese organization, there is recognition of the place and function of spiritual power, even though the governments, of course, do not attempt even to visualize the extent of what they're doing or inaugurating. But at least here you have the seeds planted of some reliance on spiritual indoctrination, some reliance of spiritual power in these places. Well, now, of course, this is only a broadening of the work that we have been doing, as you here know, for many years, of carrying this spiritual meditation work into government, corporations, trade unions, schools. In other words, our work has been penetrating many levels of society, and this activity of meditation has been carried on all 5 continents where our work is functioning. As a matter of fact, on the 6th continent in South America, only last week we learned that a tape recorder and tapes is going into a university. And the students that have the privilege of hearing infinite weight tapes each day, those that want it. So you see, the idea is really getting around, this idea of spiritual penetration, spiritual indoctrination, spiritual power. Of what does spiritual power consist? As you know, Dr. Steinmetz, early in the century, predicted that in this century, the secret of spiritual power would be revealed. It has been revealed. What is the secret of spiritual power? Now, this is what you should have learned through your own work. That as a human being, you have no spiritual power, and there is no spiritual power to govern you, guide you, or direct you. Regardless of what you may think, regardless of what you may believe, the history of the world is clear that except in isolated instances, there has been no spiritual power on earth. Or let us put it this way, that it has been so little and so seldom that it's a very difficult thing to pinpoint when it has been or where. We do know some instances. Everyone does. Paul made it clear that as creatures, as humans, we are not under the law of God, neither indeed can be. He further made it clear that you never will be under the law of God until the Spirit of God dwell in you. And your question comes up, doesn't the Spirit of God dwell in me? I don't know, the fruitage of your life must tell you that. This is certain, the Spirit of God does not dwell in mankind. The Spirit of God is not functioning except in these isolated instances on earth. If the Spirit of God were universally expressed, there would be no sin, there would be no disease, there would be no death, there would be no accidents, there would be no alcoholism, there would be no drug addiction, there would be no wars, there would be no people 70, 80, 90 years of age lying around for 10 or 20 years dying. That couldn't happen under God's government. There couldn't be this poverty in so many parts of the world, and on the other hand, so much excess prosperity in other parts of the world. Oh no. Wherever God's government has been received, it has brought gentleness, peace, love, justice, freedom, harmony, completeness, perfection, sharing, cooperating, brotherly love. Wherever the law of God functions, wherever the Spirit of God functions, it functions for good. Now, we know from the Master why the world is suffering, why it is in its present strait. He made it very clear. If you do not abide in the Word and let the Word abide in you, if you do not abide in me and let me abide in you, you will be as a branch of a tree that is cut off and withereth. That should be clear enough for anybody to understand. It should be clear enough for anybody to understand that if you are in discord, inharmony, unhappiness, lack of peace, lack of prosperity, you are as a branch of a tree that is cut off and are not being fed from the source. Just as these flowers that are cut off from the branch, you know, as beautiful as they are, you know that in 2 or 3 days they won't be. And you know why? They're cut off from the vine. They are no longer being fed from their source. They no longer have access to the earth. And because they have no access to the earth, they have no access to the sunshine and the rain. And even if you put them out in the sunshine and the rain, it would do no good because they're shut off from the soil, which is their ground. You can make the same prediction of humanity. It will end up withering and dying as these must, unless our contact with the vine is reestablished, unless our contact with our source is reestablished. We have the opportunity to do it. We have the knowledge of how to do it. And the question with each of us is, to what degree are we dedicating ourselves, devoting ourselves to that activity, returning to the Father's house, reuniting ourselves with our source? Now, it is a wonderful experience that we know how it is done. We know that everything that takes place, whether it's a separation from our Father's house or a reuniting with our source, we know that all of this takes place within our consciousness, within your consciousness and mine individually. We know that it is not a collective experience, it is an individual experience. We know that someone else cannot do it for us. We know that someone else can be a way shower. We know that someone else can reveal to us how it is done. We know that someone else can lift us in consciousness to a point of apprehension, but that last mile each one of us must take alone. Now, when the Spirit of God dwells in you, you become a child of God. You are no longer the man of earth. You are then a man who has his being in Christ. You are no longer a branch of a tree that is cut off, but you are one of the branches of the tree, supported, maintained, and sustained by the life of the tree. But something more wonderful than that. The moment you make your contact with your source, which is within you, remember that this kingdom of God I'm talking about is neither low here nor low there. It's not in a holy mountain, it's not in a holy temple, it's within you. The very place whereon thou standest is holy ground. But it must be an activity of your consciousness to bring it to fruition. Then, when you do, the miracle is this, that the flow of the Spirit through you is a benediction to thousands of others. In other words, even 10 righteous men, that is 10 individuals, spiritually, consciously, one with their source, can save an entire city. A few dozen in this world can change all history. Just as one individual receiving this light can be the light to hundreds, a few hundred here, a few hundred here, ultimately thousands in the world. Just one individual receiving this light can be a blessing to thousands on earth. So just think what 10 or 100 individuals can be. They can mold history. Then the degree of our dedication to this attainment of the realization of the Spirit is really not for us anymore. As we go out into public lectures, we will promise greater freedom, greater harmony, greater health and wholeness to the newcomers. But to you, the time is ready for your recognition of the fact that the benefit to you is the least of all we're expecting. The benefit we're expecting is what will come through you. Of course, it can't come through you without leaving some of the drippings around where you are. Certainly you'll catch some of the toys on the Christmas tree, but that won't be the important thing. You won't be too interested in these baubles. Once you bear witness to what this does for your neighbor, your friendly neighbor or your enemy neighbor, it makes no difference. As a matter of fact, you'll rejoice more in what it does for your enemy neighbor than even for your friendly neighbor, because your friendly neighbors will benefit more when there are no more enemies. Probably the Master had something like that in mind when he said, It profiteth you nothing to pray for your friends. No. What good would it do if we could pray for you and make you all healthy, wealthy, and happy, and they were still throwing bombs outside? What good would it do? It profiteth you nothing to pray for your friends. Pray for your enemies, and we won't have to pray for ourselves anymore. We'll just enter into that universal prosperity of the Spirit. That's another lesson you learn as you go on in this work, that you never do spiritual work in the way of prayer or meditation for yourself. That drops away. It just doesn't dawn in your thought to do specific work, prayer, meditation for yourself. It doesn't happen that way. You are always busy working for someone else, praying for someone else, meditating for someone else, and then satisfied with what's left over for you. So that while I am here, this trip, I hope through the public lectures to have the opportunity of introducing this way of life to a few more than have already come, but primarily in the work that we do together in these groups. You've already heard about the program from Mr. Eastman, and in whatever opportunity we have for class work, I hope to bring two things to fruition. First of all, to take you a step deeper into meditation so that you do receive a greater depth of spiritual flow from within you. And secondly, to have you work so conscientiously with our principles that the world work will have greater fruitage. You know, of course, that religious history from the beginning of time has based its activity on a belief in two powers. All religions have agreed on this, that there is one great power, usually called God, but it has other names, and that this God must be attained for the purpose of overcoming and destroying the evil power. And the reason that all religious works have failed throughout all time is that there's no truth in that teaching at all. There is no such thing as a God power that is going to destroy evil powers. There is no God that is going to destroy the devil. I think one of the greatest reasons for rejoicing that I've had in many weeks is when I read that the Church of England was willing to take out of its catechism the devil and agree with the infinite way that evil is impersonal. Now you know what a tremendous step forward that is, don't you? Once you stop personalizing evil, you know you've got it 3/4 licked. Do you know the minute you stop having a devil, and the minute you stop making devils of people, whether they're people we like or don't like, or whether they're foreigners whom we fear or hate, the moment we stop personalizing evil, we have evil 3/4 defeated. And the other quarter is defeated when we realize that since evil isn't ordained of God, it has no law or power. Now here you have the foundational principle of the infinite way, that which is its starting point, that which has been its foundation from the beginning, that which has been responsible for whatever measure of healing works have taken place on individual scales or collective scale, whether in health or relationships, commerce, industry, government. This is the basis, not calling upon a God to destroy evil, but in the recognition of the impersonal and impotent nature of what confronts us as evil, that which is appearing to us as evil. Now, if we can grasp that principle more thoroughly during this month, if we can understand, and I think it should help us that a tremendous church like the Church of England, that its higher-ups, those with vision, have seen that there is no devil, that evil is impersonal, because it's the final step before the last one, the final step before the final step. The next one will be to reveal evil is impersonal and then it's impotent. And then you'll see what Steinmetz meant when he said the nature of spiritual power would be revealed in this century. This is the nature of spiritual power. Once you know, no power is needed to destroy evil, but a recognition must take place of the impersonal, impotent nature of that which we have been fearing, that which we have been fighting. The battle is not yours, and yet we haven't believed that. Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, but we haven't believed that. Not by the law, but by grace, but we haven't believed that. Spiritual power consists in believing those things. The law came by Moses, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Do something to the other fellow before he does it to you. Be there first with the most. The law came by Moses, but grace and truth came by Christ Jesus. Is this that came by Christ Jesus a fantasy, a mirage, a myth? Heaven forbid that we should all take the name of Christian if Christianity is a myth. But I know the Christian church is recognizing now that it never was a myth. That was the truth of being. That was spiritual power, not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit. Ye need not fight. Ye need not fight. Even the great Hebrew prophet saw that. The enemy, fear them not. They have only the arm of flesh, temporal power. We have the Spirit. Just as you will prove in your individual personal experience that as you relax, as you let your shoulders droop, drop that sense of personal responsibility in the realization God never ordained evil. God never created evil. God never gave us a law of evil. How do we know this? Because the Master's function on earth was to destroy all evil, overcome it, prove its nothingness. To the crippled man, what did hinder you? To the blind man, open your eyes. To the sinners, neither do I condemn thee. In every way his mission was to prove the nothingness of these appearances that we call sin, disease, death, lack, limitation, the plots of mankind. And so it will be that as you in your individual experience prove that no weapon that is formed against you shall prosper, whether it is formed in the form of germs, infection, contagion, physical enemies, mental enemies, as you prove that no weapon that is formed against you will prosper, so will you prove that no weapon that is formed against humanity will prosper. Because actually, any evil that's aimed at you or me is really aimed at mankind. It doesn't just pick out a you or me for no reason to attack, but in attacking us, it's really attacking all mankind. And so each one of us gets hit, one by a form of disease, one by a form of sin, one by a form of lack, one by a form of unhappiness. It wasn't aimed at you or me. It was aimed at mankind. And the antidote, the realization of the impersonal nature and the impotent nature of evil, doesn't only remove it from you, but in removing it from you, it removes it from mankind. Every time spiritual power results in harmony to any individual, at any time and in any place, in that degree it has lessened evil in the entire world. Somewhere else on earth, somebody also is responding to that same prayer, that same meditation, that same realization of impotence and impersonality. So that we have these two things to work with while we are here. In our spiritual unfoldment, we can go along for quite a few years without noticing too much progress. That isn't true in every case. There are startling improvements, startling changes in the lives of some individuals. There are gradual changes in the lives of others, and there are very, very slow changes in still others. That all has to do with a question that we will not take up tonight. But the point is that it is very possible for us to have years in which we note little or no external change, improvement, even though at times we feel that we're making some measure of progress inwardly. The answer is this: as long as we can feel some change taking place within our consciousness, our function is to keep going forward, because the breaking up in consciousness is taking place. Just as the idea of freedom, equality, manifested itself as far back as the Magna Carta, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Civil War in the States. Just think how many years back the idea of individual liberty, individual freedom, individual equality has been operating in human consciousness. And just remember that it is only in our present age that it is coming into universal expression and manifestation. It came here in England years and years and years ago. It came in Holland. It came in the United States. It came in France. But look at the way it is traveling the world now. And just as it did not free everyone under British rule, neither did it free everyone under American rule. But all those things that were not done in the years gone by are now being done and being transformed, so that I'm sure you'll agree that within 100 years from now, there'll be no such thing on this earth as a slave, no such thing on this earth as a people dominated or controlled by others. Every nation, every race will be free, will be self-supporting, will be on their own. Education and evolution are bringing all of this about. But remember, it has been unfolding for several hundred years. So it is. Don't think for a minute that the hard places in your consciousness yield in your first year of study. Don't think for a minute that the human traits that have been built up on this false premise of self-preservation is the first law of nature. Do you know what a quotation like that has done to your human consciousness? Why, it has made of us more of animals than humans. Just that one thing on which we have really felt was something fine. Self-preservation is the first law of nature. Why, it's made us willing to do anything to everybody else as long as we were preserved. And I've often quoted this. It used to be a top banner line in one of our great New York newspapers. My country, right or wrong, my country. What do you think that does to human consciousness? To develop a sense in us that we don't care about any other country. We don't care what's right or wrong for them as long as we... Do you think for a minute that's all been ironed out of us so quickly? Do you not realize what religious and racial bigotries have done to you and to me and to everybody on the face of this globe? Do you realize what it means before those things can be ironed out of our consciousness? Therefore you will know why it is that until these adamant, materialistic, and sometimes sadistic tendencies are eradicated from us, that we're not showing forth the fullness of the gentleness which is of the Spirit. Where the Spirit of God is, there is gentleness, there is peace, there is freedom, there is joy, there is sharing. But you see what has to give way in us before that Spirit of the Lord God is upon us and we are ordained. What we should watch for is not whether or not our outer circumstances are transmuted overnight, but whether or not we inwardly are yielding from our materialistic basis to spiritual realization. If the Spirit of God is producing in us more love, more justice, more freedom, a greater unfoldment of grace rather than the law.